Hi grade 10s, it's Miss Thungaraj here, and today we're going to make our final video for this unit. We're going to talk about solving systems of equations using elimination for a second time, and this time our elimination questions will be just slightly more complicated, but together we can learn it with no problem at all. Before we start, please make sure you get a pencil and a piece of paper so you can do math with me while you're watching this video. I want to remind you a little bit about elimination. Elimination is when we are adding or subtracting the equations to get rid of a variable, but you won't be able to eliminate x or y when you add or subtract unless the coefficients in front of x or y are the same. So that is the first thing we need to try to do. We're going to start by looking at the questions in the red box on page 11. We are going to do the first question together, and then I'm going to leave you the second question to try for homework. So let's do that first question now together. So here's my question. What I notice is that none of my coefficients are the same. The 3 and the 2 are not the same. And right here, this is a 1, and the -3 are not the same. So you cannot do elimination unless the coefficients are the same. So this is a situation where we're going to need to multiply one of the equations in order to make those coefficients the same. So I notice that if I have a 1 and I multiply it by 3, I will get 3, and then these two will be the same. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to multiply this, I'm going to multiply it by this, I'm going to multiply this. And you can do whatever you want to an equation as long as you do the same thing to both sides. So 3 times 3 is 9x's. 1 times 3 is plus 3y. 5 times 3 is 15. So we're now going to work with these two equations. They work much better because they have coefficients which are not identical, but they're awfully similar. One is -3 and one is +3. So this is where you need to get your calculator out and you need to decide, should you add them or should you subtract them to get 0? So you would need to take your calculator out and try -3 minus +3. That'd be one option. Or -3 minus -3. You need to plus, I should say. Miss Thungaraj is messing this up. So either I'm going to subtract them or I'm going to add them. I need to decide which one is going to give me 0. If I use my calculator, -3 minus 3 gives me -6. And -3 plus +3 gives me 0. So in this case, I want to add them. And if I add the 3's, I need to add everything. So here I have 2x plus 9x gives me 11x. Here I have 7 plus 15 gives me 22. And then I'm going to divide by 11, divide by 11, and my x is equal to 2. There's my dog again. She's so cute, but she wants to go for a walk. So I've let her out in the backyard, so hopefully she'll be quiet enough that we can continue our video together. When we look at Desmos, we see that the two lines do intersect at 2, -1. So our x is equal to 2 is correct. And now we just need to do a little bit more algebra so we can get the answer y is equal to -1. So when you're trying to find y, you can pick either one of the original equations. Let's not use the purple one. Let's keep the two reds that we started off with. So I'm going to use the top one, the 3x plus 1y is equal to 5. And I know that x is equal to 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 2 where the x is, and that means I need to multiply 3 times 2 gives me 6, plus 1y gives me 5. I want to get the y by itself, so I'm going to move the 6 to the other side, because I'm going to subtract 6 to cancel it out. 5 minus 6 is -1, that means y is equal to -1. That means I could put these two numbers together, the x and the y, and I get x is equal to 2, y is equal to -1. That is the solution. And that's exactly what we see. We're now on page 13, and that's the last page of assignment number 3. We are nearly done, and we're going to do this example together. And you want to remember that your goal with elimination is to add or subtract to get rid of either the x or the y, but you can't do that unless the coefficients for either x or for y are the same. So here's the question. Now, there seems to be a bit of a problem here because there's nothing I can multiply 4 by to get 7. And there's nothing I can multiply 3 by to get 2. Or there's nothing I can multiply 2 by to get 3. Over here, when we looked at the last example, I easily just multiplied 1 by 3 and I got 3. That worked. But that's not going to work in this situation. So when you can't think of a number to multiply that will give you the other coefficient, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to multiply both equations. For example, if I were to multiply this top equation by 2, I would have, that means I need to multiply everything by 2, I would have 8x minus 6y is equal to 18. Okay, that doesn't seem to help because I still have 7 and 8 and 2 and 6. They're nothing the same. But what I notice now is that if I were to multiply the second equation by 3, why would I do that? Multiplying 7 times 3 does not give you 8, but multiplying 2 times 3 gives you 6. So sometimes you need to multiply both equations. So 7 times 3 is going to give you 21x. 2 times 3 is going to give you plus 6y. Negative 6 times 3 is going to give you negative 18. Sometimes it's a little trickier because you need to multiply both equations. But after that step, it's all the same. We first now need to decide, are we going to add or subtract? I know, and you want to check this with your calculator because you don't want to make a silly mistake. If I add negative 6 plus 6, it gives me 0. So I want to add the equations. If I'm adding these two, I also need to add the other numbers. So 8x plus 21x gives me 28x. 18 plus negative 18 gives me 0. Okay, we've never seen that before, but that's fine. So now we're going to divide both sides by 28 to get my x by itself. And 0 divided by anything gives me 0. That means they should intersect at x is equal to 0. Since that's a little bit weird, let's go check on Desmos to make sure that we are on the right track. That's a relief. We see that x should be equal to 0. So now the only part that we're left to do is we need to get y equals to negative 3. And we'll do that now together. To find the y, I need to take my x is equal to 0 and put it into one of my original equations. It doesn't matter which one. Let's just pick the second one. So I've got 7x plus 2y is equal to negative 6. And I know from my work from before that x is equal to 0. So I'm going to cross off this x and I'm going to put a 0 here. And remember, since they're right next to each other, I'm multiplying. 7 times 0 is just 0. So I have 0 plus 2y is equal to negative 6. That just means I have 2y is equal to negative 6. And that means y is equal to negative 6 divided by 2. Y is equal to negative 3. And I think that's what we saw in Desmos. We saw that the intersection point should be 0, negative 3. The x is 0, the y is negative 3. So that means we haven't made any mistake. So how could I check my work if I didn't have Desmos? There must be a way. So I want you to think back to video number 1 of this series. And in video number 1, we did questions where we had to check to see if a point was the solution to a system of equations. And remember, we subbed in the x's and y's into both equations to make sure they worked. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to check to see if 0 -3 works for both equations. So both equations were 4x minus 3y is equal to 9 and 7x plus 2y is equal to -6. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the x and the y into the equations. So my x is 0, my y is -3, so 4 times 0 is 0, 0, and then we have -3 times -3. That gives me, oh, this works, great. Now let's check the other one. Okay, so we're going to put a 0 here, we're going to put a -3 here, so 7 times 0 is 0, 2 times -3 is -6. Ah, this works as well. So we know that our solution to the system of equations is correct even without the help of decimal. I'm leaving you with 2 homework questions today. The first question is on page 11. It's the second one in that red box. And then I'm also leaving you a question from page 13, the last question from the booklet. Those are the 2 questions that I would like you to try on your own for homework. If you could try those and you can send them to me and I'd be happy to check them. And then you want to send me all your work for assignment number 3 by May 19th. And I will mark it and then we'll move on to our next unit together. Please, if you have questions, send them my way. And if you've watched my YouTube video, please leave me a comment. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, grade 10s.